instead and talk about the Saints and the Seahawks tonight, which of course is the most anticipated NFL game of the year to date. From SportsNoah.com and WGSO Radio, of course, former longtime high school football coach as well at St. James, among many stops. Please give a warm welcome to Rick Gaille. Rick.
Thank y'all for the opportunity to be here in my role as chief substitute. If somebody can't make it, then you get to be subjected to my opinion. And as both Kenny and Ed on our Saturday morning shows know only too well, I pride myself on the ability to take both sides of every argument. Tonight, with the Saints playing this week's game of the year, but it seems like it really is. Just a hugely important game. The Saints are, by all logic, an underdog. Seattle has won 13 consecutive games at home, which is unheard of in the NFL, and they have a tremendous advantage there, and play the style of football that has given the Saints some difficulty. Physical, tough football team with the ability to run the football, a quarterback that is maneuverable and able to make big plays, and until last week looked like defensively had the ability to match up with the Saints. First, Seattle offensively wants to run the football with Marshawn Lynch, and the Saints have got to be able to stop that. Something that's been encouraging since the Jets lost is that the Saints have been physical enough to stand up to potential bullies, because Seattle takes a very similar type of attitude as San Francisco does, that they want to punch you in the nose and get you to back up. The Saints, since the Jets game, have really stood up to physical football teams. What's different about Seattle is that they like to play with two backs the majority of the time, but they try to get the opponents into a 5 defensive back type of look, so something to look for in tonight's game. How often, early in the game, do the Seahawks come out with 2 backs and 3 wide receivers? Because in the NFL, it is very matchup oriented, and sometimes you get some automatic personnel situations. In fact, what first alerted me to this was when Nick Saban was at LSU, and they had automatic substitution patterns, personnel groupings, that all the defensive backs would just look on the other side, see who came in the game, and they would substitute for themselves. That as soon as you went, if you had 2 receivers, they had 4 defensive backs, 3 receivers went 5 defensive backs, a nickel, and if they went 4 wide receivers, they go 6 defensive backs or dime. Well, in the NFL, it's not quite automatic, but pretty darn close to it. So usually, when you go with 3 wide receivers, you're getting nickel defenses, which means you only have 6 people up front. 5 linemen, 1 linebacker, 4 linemen, 2 linebackers, a 3-3 type looks, and then they run at the nickel back, which is probably the worst athlete out of the bunch. So look for that early. See if the Seahawks are going to do that, because they want Marshawn Lynch to try to dominate the Saints like he did in the playoff game a couple of years ago. And the Saints' run defense over the course of the year has been the worst in the league at average per attempt. They've given up greater yards per attempt than anybody in the league, but over the last couple of weeks that has improved dramatically. And one of the advantages the Saints are going to have is that Kenny Vaccaro is healthy. When he's healthy, they're tough. And Roman Harper is healthy. And one thing Roman Harper can do is play close to the line of scrimmage. Please don't get him in space. But he's good close to the line of scrimmage. And so those 2 guys give Rob Ryan some flexibility in what he does. And Rob Ryan is a contrarian. He doesn't care, a lot of times he doesn't care what the opponent's personnel groupings are. He looks at down and distance, and he's going to put that personnel grouping in that he thinks is appropriate for that situation, which works out well most of the time. Every now and then, we saw it against the Jets a couple of times. They got caught in poor personnel packages against what the Jets eventually did. But most of the time, that dictates to the offense what they can do. Because so much in the NFL becomes inbred, becomes incestuous in nature, that everybody does the same thing in every situation. And Ryan is a bit of a contrarian in that, and that's good for the Saints. Looking at Russell Wilson, the Saints need to make him make plays to win the game. Now, because if he doesn't have to make plays to win the game, it means you didn't stop Marshawn Lynch. So you've got to stop Marshawn Lynch. Yeah, but Russell Wilson's plenty good enough to win games. Yes, he's only in his second year, but he's 25 years old. He's not a kid. You got to remember, he left North Carolina State to go play minor league baseball. He signed a professional baseball contract, I think it was for 2 years before he went to Wisconsin. Very unique individual, was voted as team captain in North Carolina State, and before he had even taken a snap in Wisconsin, we'd gone through spring practice, gone through summer practice with him. Before the season, the team in Wisconsin voted him the team captain, and he hadn't even played. He hadn't attended a class at that particular point. So a very unique individual, but he's not a kid like some of these other second-year quarterbacks. Let's see. An advantage for the Saints offensively is that Seattle's second and third defensive backs are out of the game, one by injury, one by suspension. One is actually out by injury and suspension. So it means that Richard Sherman, who's their first defensive back, may very well have been covering Jimmy Graham from the very beginning, much like Aqib Talib did for the Patriots. He's a similar type of physical type of corner, and it may have been in Seattle's original plan to put him on Jimmy Graham all over the place. Now, with the second and third defensive backs out, Seattle is actually going to have to play with their fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh defensive backs. Those guys are going to, all of a sudden, a couple of them from off the street onto the field, are going to have to match up against the Saints receivers, and I doubt that they're going to be able to take Richard Sherman, put him over on Jimmy Graham, and say, giddy up. So that gives the Saints an advantage there. But I also think the Saints learned against the Patriots, if they're going to take a big corner and put him on Jimmy Graham, run the ball at him. And that's where they did not, what they did not do, if you remember, consistently enough against the Patriots, is that guy's covering Jimmy Graham not to go tackle running back. They're putting him there to be physical with him down the field. So you want to run the ball at the person that's having to cover Jimmy Graham. Also, the Saints use tighter formations than anybody in the league. And that also keeps Richard Sherman off the line of scrimmage more. If you look, there's a lot of formations that they have with all 11 people between the numbers. They don't spread out from sideline to sideline. They do a great job of running tighter formations than anybody in the league. A couple of reasons for that. One of them is that Drew Brees' weakness, if there is one, now weakness is relative, is that he has difficulty throwing the ball deep down the numbers. He's only really good at that. He's not great at the other things like he is with the rest of his game. So Seattle's concept has got to be squeeze, keep everything between the numbers, force him to try to throw the ball deep to the boundary, keep the seams congested, the areas straight up the hash marks, and to try to force him to either throw the ball deep to the boundary or check the ball down. That whole philosophy and theory came back to Indianapolis in the Super Bowl. That's what they did, and the Saints labored a bit in that because they continually have to check the ball down. They got to check the ball down short and be methodical. They're much less effective than when they're able to run their complete offense. As long as Sproles plays, and he's probable, that's a great advantage for the Saints. Jari Evans was probable. Chris Carr, as a fifth and sixth defensive back, is an important ingredient. The Saints made a mistake when they didn't activate him against the Jets, and it cost them, because Carr is highly intelligent, and he makes up for a lot of mistakes, gets people in the right place. But he's probable for tonight. Percy Harvin is doubtful for Seattle. If he can't go, or if he's less than his best, that's a significant advantage for the Saints. The weather is supposed to be, I believe, in the 30s. Won't be freezing, but it'll be plenty cold enough. I don't think the wind is going to be a factor. That was supposed to be minimal amount. I think they were going to have some precipitation during the day, less of a chance at night, and they're supposed to try to set a record for noise making. It's got to be, the stadium I know contributes to it, because there's no way in the world that I could possibly believe that a bunch of tree huggers from Washington State can set a noise record. And I'm glad this is being videoed. My sister lives in Portland, Oregon, and has lived there for quite a while. I can tell you this, when Oregonians call somebody a tree hugger, you can believe it. That's got to be at the bottom of the food chain of tree huggers. That for Oregonians to say that. And in the matchups, again, the Saints passing game. Now, it's easy for us to say, hey, the Saints are going to throw the ball, the Saints are going to run the ball and all that. Okay, but here's what goes into it. All right, Saints, we got to throw the ball. They got their 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th defensive backs, and we got to throw the ball. So the next question is, how? Drop back, play action, half sprint, roll out. What formations? What's the pass protection? What's the route combinations? What's the personnel grouping? And then you've got to have almost an infinite number of combinations to put together and narrow that down so that you can practice it during the week. So it's never ever simple as we got to run the ball. We got to pass the ball. There's a lot more stuff to that, and when you look at the multiplicity of defenses that have to be blocked in the NFL now, and now it's sifting down to the collegiate level as well, it's a heck of a lot more complicated than simply deciding that, hey, we got to throw the ball more. Because if the Saints can run the ball effectively, especially early in the game, and make the Seattle defensive linemen play run blocks. Here's the value of a running game in pro football. Defensive linemen and linebackers have completely different responsibilities and techniques on the run than they do in the passing game, and especially your defensive linemen. Defensive linemen against the pass are trying to avoid getting blocked. They're swimming, swatting, slapping, turning their shoulders, trying to get their hips past you, ducking shoulders, trying to get around blocks. They don't want to take a blocker straight on. They're doing everything they can to avoid that. If you do that in the running game, you don't need to throw the ball. Because in the running game, it's taking on a defensive lineman with your head on one side or another, keeping one arm or the other free, taking on the defensive lineman, controlling that person, taking your gap, squeezing another gap, and shedding the block and getting to the ball carrier. Two entirely different things that they have to do. Linebackers have to come up on the pass, back on the run. Some of our teams at St. James sometimes had problems in that run-pass decision, especially the secondary when they were coming up on the pass and back on the run. And then we would have some difficulty with that. So that's the value of the running game. It's that if you make the defense play run defense, then it's much more difficult for them to get to the quarterback. The Saints can do that, make them play some run defense, then the Saints can be successful. If you had to make a pick, you got to pick Seattle. Logic doesn't tell you otherwise. But fortunately, the game isn't logical, and the Saints, I think, have the best opportunity of anybody in the league to go up there and win tonight. Do you have any questions?
The Saints have not been successful in cold weather games on the road. And this especially kind of cold weather game, as well as the Super Bowl is going to be in New York in February in an outdoor stadium. What kind of a mental hurdle can be had by winning this game, or is that overplayed on that level of professional football?
No, you're absolutely right. There's nothing that's inconsequential at that level. When the margins of victory and defeat are so narrow, there's nothing that's inconsequential. That's why coaches are paranoid about everything. And I think Sean Payton being angry at everybody even bringing up that subject this week was a great tact. The Saints are the best team in the league on the road, but they're still not as good as they are at home. No team in the league is as good on the road as they are at home, except the Philadelphia Eagles. But then if you left Philadelphia, you'd feel better about yourself too. So the Saints, just because they're an NFL team, and Coach Baglio and I were talking about that before. Pete Jenkins told us that 20 years ago. He says, Rick, it just doesn't, it's not logical, it doesn't make any sense. Teams just aren't as good on the road as they are at home. So yes, cold weather is a part of that. Brady shouldn't have as much of a problem. It affects everybody to begin with. He did play at Purdue. He was there 4 years and is somewhat used to that. But his timing is different when he's on the road, and especially in cold weather. Your feel is different. I mean, all you got to do is go play golf, and go play golf in July around here, and then go play golf in January, and you know there's a difference. The ball is different, the ground is, everything's different. So yes, the cold, as long as it's not windy, I think it'll be less of a factor. Wind is the natural factor that you cannot overcome. You have to deal with it. Rain you can deal with, cold you can deal with, wind much more difficult to deal with. It's not supposed to be that windy, but yes, it's going to affect play somewhat. It's going to affect Seattle as well, and that's why defense has become more important in cold weather. And as far as the Super Bowl in January, nobody's going to play worth a crap. They're going to have snow up to their ears, and after the nonsense that we took just because a few light bulbs went out, I really don't give a damn if they got snow up to their ear holes. We have another question. Yes, sir.
Coach, if you could put your LHSAA hat on. And by the way, Coach B.J. Gazzardo told me to tell you and Coach Charlie hello. And he said this would be a great question to ask you. You said at last January when they had the meeting that once the dust settled, this is not going to be a quick fix. There's going to be some permanent changes. What do you think? Because we're only about a month away from that next January meeting. What do you hear? What do you think? And what could happen if anything could happen? Thank you, Coach.
Very good. This is about the split and the ramifications of that and what's going to happen before. There will be changes. I think, and well, I know this for a fact, how we feel in New Orleans, greater New Orleans area, and how the rest of the state feels, especially the northern part of the state, are two entirely different things. You would think you're in another country talking. Well, they are. They're way up north. They're at Shreveport. How they feel about it. There's going to be some changes because everybody does realize that 9 state championships is way too much. But there's also people on the executive committee that feel a lot of this has been brought on by the select schools. I'm just being a reporter here. I'm not the messenger, I'm just a reporter. Because the executive committee believes that the split was inevitable. There was no question in January that there was going to be voting, the vote for the split was going to be overwhelming, and it was. It was 200 to 100, basically. How you handled it after that was going to be the important part. And the executive committee believes, almost unanimously, that they gave the private schools, the select schools, every opportunity to do what they wanted. It was, here you go, select schools, you're separate from the non-select schools, you divide up the way you want to. And that the reason that there are 4 divisions on the select side is because that's what the select schools agreed upon. Now, it is extraordinarily difficult to get, I'm going to call them academians. Okay? I know the word is academician. That's somebody who knows that they're an educator. An academian is somebody who thinks they're an educator. You cannot get academians to agree on anything when it comes to reclassification, when it comes to divisions, when it comes to districting. All you got to do is attend those meetings, which will happen next year. And the most selfish part of education is in those meetings. It's incredible. People of intelligence coming up with all kinds of convoluted reasons to do all kinds of stuff. So, but the executive committee thought that, okay, select schools, you come up with your own plan. Because originally the proposal was to be in 2, have 2 divisions for the select side. That way you can fill up brackets. The problem with that is that when you look at populations at each schools, 2 divisions had too big a spread between the most populated and the least populated on each side. So I really thought when they had that next select meeting that they would go to 3 divisions. If they'd have gone to 3 divisions on that side, then you'd have had full brackets in each place, you'd have eliminated the buys, and it would have been somewhat, it would have been much more equitable than it is now. Now, I'm glad, Billy and I got a chance to work together last Friday. Curtis and Evangel stay out of it. They just tell us what to do. But the other select schools didn't want to play them either. And so that's why they came up with the whole thing. And they thought originally that 5A and 4A were going to go in one division, and then 3A was going to be in 2A, 1A would be a different division. Well, that all got convoluted and mixed up out of whack when Division 1 wound up with only 10 teams in it. That's the elephant in the room that people try not to talk about. If the association, and this is the entire rest of the association could take those two schools, put them in their own division, say y'all go play each other 15 times, then everybody else could get along. I would believe that going forward, the way, if the split continues to be inevitable, that you cannot get an agreement to all go back together, then the solution is have 4 classifications for state championship honors and 3 divisions, and then divide it up. Because something else we've learned about this is just because you have classifications doesn't mean you can't change the divisions for the playoffs. Because before we had 5 classifications, so therefore everybody had to stay in that all the way through. Guess what we just found out? That we could have 5 classifications, everybody could play, yada, 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 divide up into 7, 4 and 3, and go play. Is that good? No, because the state, when you look at it, numbers-wise, really should have 4 classifications and everybody plays in that. I know you can't get agreement on that, and I don't know if you're going to get any agreement on anything other than some semblance of a split.
So if you could do whatever you think is the best way, what would be your?
Oh, what would be my best, if once again, if the split is inevitable, okay? And here's why it very well may be. There's a bunch of principals that don't think it's fair to them to have a single attendance zone, and other schools have multiple attendance zones. Now, I know that takes in some magnet schools as well. Byrd is in the select side, even though that's a public school. And there's some others that belong in the select. And so I'm going to approach it like that. I'm going to play the ball as it lies here and say, okay, a split is inevitable. We cannot resolve that under any circumstance. We can't. Then I would go with 4 classifications for the non-select schools. I would go with 3 divisions for the select schools. And then once the regular season is over, you just divide it by population, 4 and 3, and fill out your 32-team brackets and go. There's other sports that have 7 state champions in it. Basketball is one of them. Basketball has 14. You have 7 girls and 7 boys. So 7, 10, 9 is stupid because you can't fill out a bracket. You know, once you get in the playoffs, you should just start and play all the way through. And that could be a solution, but I think that's going to be way too logical for the academics.
If the split's inevitable because of certain principles or what have you, is it obviously certain principals believe that private schools can go anywhere and get kids. So our public schools across the state all have to play in the district they're in and there's no other choice? Or do we have pass-fail schools where kids in a failing school can go to a different school and can they pick wherever they want to go? And or I guess, I don't even know exactly what it is on the parents, but so are they really, they're not upset about those, I guess, to be those principals? Isn't that the same thing almost as the private school model, where you're in a failing school, you go wherever you want to go?
There you go, Billy, throwing logic and common sense into the conversation. You are 1,000% correct. Education now isn't what we think of as education. There is nothing that's the same. In fact, the single attendance zone school that you and I remember walking to elementary school, all right? And then everybody went to 1 or 2 schools. We had East Jefferson on the East Bank, West Jefferson on the West Bank of Jefferson Parish where I was in. There were just a few schools. Those single attendance zone schools, those are becoming almost dinosaurs now. Yes, principals as a whole are upset that schools that have an advantage over them are still playing with them. I can tell you for a fact, with Coach Jones here, principals throughout the state are upset that Carr, Landry Walker, or Warren Easton are in non-select. Okay, and there's other schools, they were non-selected and on further review.
Why, Coach? Why are those principals upset?
Because they get students from a wider area
Could you explain that?
than their school. Okay, in Orleans Parish, especially, you get a kid in Orleans Parish can go just about anywhere they want. I think I'm about right in that. It's not like Baton Rouge was for a long period of time. Orleans Parish is a single attendance zone, and each school doesn't have their specific attendance zone. And when you're a magnet school, you can get kids from multiple areas, even within a singular parish. All right? For instance, Byrd is on the select side because they get kids from a wide area, and they've got some special programs that make their attendance at their school selective. They can turn kids down for going there. And those schools have, in their opinion, okay, once again, I'm the reporter here, you know, because I'm getting tons of texts from north and west, southwest Louisiana. You know, how are they in non-select when they've got a different type of admission standard? And Coach Jones could probably elaborate a little bit on that for us.
I think being at Carl, for us, we just want what's best for Louisiana football, high school football in general, because we have the tradition where we can go play against the John Curtises and the Evangels and the West Monroes and whomever. I think the problem is with the public schools, and this is just what I think, because we were for us staying together, is that some private schools recruit, and I probably shouldn't say that word, they get kids from different parishes. So if you're in Orleans Parish, you have kids from Orleans Parish, Jefferson Parish, St. Charles, several different parishes, and so they're saying we're not playing on an even playing field. And I think a lot of times the public schools where Chalmette, what's the public schools over there? The private school in Chalmette.
There's none anymore.
Used to be Hannah.
No, there are none. Hannon's on the
Hannon's on North Shore now.
And Holy Cross is now.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
Well, I thought there was one over there where all the kids were now going to the private schools and they were getting the better athletes and they would play each other and then they would lose to them and say, hey, that kid's in our zone, our traditional zone. So, I don't think there's a right answer, but I just know that, we're stronger together. We have a better brand of football when we're all together. So, how we get that done, I don't know, but that's sort of, I think, what the gripe is.
There's no easy answers. Nothing is the same now as it's going to be. We talked about Saturday. Well, something's going to happen with this college football thing, and somebody's going to lose that we're not anticipating. Boom. And it happened. God, we predict this. Of course, we just say everything that could possibly happen, and something's got to be right. Thank y'all for having me, and I'll be